A giant wild horse didn't attack the cowboy. It begged him, desperately, to save its dying foal. On a storm-soaked night in Wyoming, a rugged cowboy hit the brakes when a massive wild stallion stepped into the road, its eyes burning with something no man had ever seen in a Mustang, a plea for help. And when the horse turned toward the darkness, the cowboy realized this wasn't danger. This was a father begging him to follow. The storm rolled over the Wyoming plains like something that remembered how to hurt. Rain came sideways, slashing at the windshield of Cole Hartman's old pickup, turning the world beyond the wipers into a smear of gray and white. The heater rattled weakly. Somewhere under the dash, something hummed in a way that said it might give up at any moment, the way most things did out here if you didn't keep after them. Cole hunched forward over the steering wheel, eyes narrowed, watching the two thin tracks of the dirt road vanish under a river of mud. The radio muttered low in the background, half static, half some late-night country song about loss and mortgages and men too proud to ask for help. A commercial for an injury lawyer tried to cut through the static, promising justice and big settlements in a slick, rehearsed voice. Cole reached over and flicked the dial off with 2 fingers. He'd seen enough men in fancy hats promise the world and walk away when the dust settled. Lightning tore across the sky, bright enough to turn the cab pale blue for a heartbeat. In that flash, he saw the shape of his own hand on the wheel, knuckles rough, skin cracked from cold and work. Then darkness swallowed it again. The smell of wet dust worked its way in through the vents, that particular scent that came when summer heat met sudden rain. It should have felt like relief. Tonight it felt like warning. He was late getting back. The cows would be huddled near the cottonwoods, rumps to the wind, pretending they didn't care. The barn roof leaked in the southwest corner. He'd meant to fix it after last winter's storm, but other things kept getting in the way. Fences, water lines, bank calls about late payments, polite at first, and then less so. Living, mostly. He thought of the house waiting at the end of the road, a low, sagging structure with peeling white paint, and one light he'd left on above the kitchen sink. No one inside, just a table with a single coffee mug and a stack of feed bills. Sometimes, on nights like this, he still caught himself listening for a different sound as he pulled into the yard. A laugh, a voice, the soft clink of a second cup. The storm gave him nothing back but the drumming of rain on metal. He rounded the shallow bend where the cottonwoods clustered, their black trunks looming through the curtain of water like sentries. The truck's headlights plowed into the downpour, carving out a narrow tunnel of visibility. The wipers squealed on the glass, smearing more than they cleared. He blinked, leaned forward another inch. Then his foot slammed down on the brake before his mind caught up. The truck fishtailed on the mud, the back end skidding sideways. For a long second, the world turned into noise. Rain, tires, the hollow thud of his heart. The headlights swung and caught something massive in their beam, and the sight of it snapped everything into stillness. A horse stood in the road. Not just a horse. Too big for that word to land right. It filled the space between the twin ruts like a wall of living night, muscles slick with rain, mane hanging in thick, dripping ropes. The coat was so black the light seemed to sink into it. Water streamed down its neck and chest, gathering at the hollows like liquid glass. It did not rear or bolt or shy away from the truck. It simply stood there, planted square in the middle of the road, facing him. Cole's hands locked on the steering wheel. The engine idled in a rough, uneven rhythm, the only sound besides the rain. The beams of the headlights cut through the downpour and lit the animal from the front, casting a long, ink-dark shadow behind it that disappeared into the swirling storm. Then he saw the eyes. They glowed in the light. Amber, deep and steady, not wide with panic as he'd seen in spooked strays, not dull like the resigned gaze of an old plow horse. These eyes were alive in a way that made the hair on his arms rise. They were not wild in the sense of chaos. They were wild the way mountains were wild, the way the sky was, right before lightning found a place to land. "Easy," Cole murmured, more out of habit than hope. His voice sounded strange in the small cab, too soft for the violence of the storm beating around them. The horse didn't flinch. It flicked its tail once, deliberate, sending a fan of rainwater arcing away. Its ears were forward, fixed on him. The head was high, but there was no snorting, no pawing at the ground, no restless shifting. If anything, the big animal looked anchored, intent, like it had been waiting exactly here, at this bend in this storm, for him. The thought was so absurd he almost snorted. Horses didn't wait for people. Not out here. Not like this. Unless it had been hit, dazed, or he leaned sideways, peering past the steering wheel, trying to see if there was another animal down in the ditch. The rain turned everything beyond the horse into a gray curtain. He couldn't tell if the shoulders were favoring one side, if there was blood somewhere in all that moving black. He took a breath and forced himself to think. A stray from some neighbor's ranch, maybe. A fence down. A panicked Mustang blown in by the storm from the BLM land. He should ease back, give it room to move, wait for it to wander off the road, call Lyle in the morning. That was the reasonable, safe thing. The kind of decision an insurance adjuster would nod at if they ever had to look over a report with his name on it. Instead, he killed the engine. The sudden quiet roared, louder than any thunder. Without the motor's rumble, he could hear the storm properly. The hiss of rain on soaked dirt, the distant roll of thunder moving across the basin, the tick of cooling metal under the hood. Wind pushed at the side of the truck, rocking it gently, as if trying to pry him loose from the seat. The horse did not move. Cole's heart hammered against his ribs, fast then slowing, as if trying to find a new rhythm in this strange, suspended moment. He watched the animal through the glass. The huge chest rose and fell, breath puffing in visible bursts that turned to mist, then vanished in the cold night air. "Okay," he muttered, more to himself than anything. "Let's see what you're about." He reached for the flashlight under the seat, fingers closing around the worn rubber handle. The metal was cool, reassuringly solid. He popped the door latch with his shoulder and pushed it open. Rain hit him instantly, cold enough to make him gasp. The wind grabbed at the door, trying to slam it back, but he shoved it wide and stepped down into the mud. His boots sank an inch, water soaking the leather. He straightened slowly, making sure his movements were smooth. The air outside smelled like wet sagebrush and electricity. The horse watched him. He could feel those eyes on him as clearly as if someone had laid a hand on his chest. He lifted the flashlight but didn't turn it on yet. No need to throw a harsh beam into the face of something that big and tense. "Hey there," he said quietly, voice nearly lost under the rain. "You picked a hell of a night to go sightseeing?" For a long heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the horse made a sound. It started low, somewhere deep in its chest, a vibration more than a noise. It rolled up through its throat and out into the storm as a broken, resonant whinny that felt wrong in a way Cole couldn't name. It was too rough for a call, too long for a snort, too heavy for a simple greeting. It hit him in the sternum. That sound, like a fist made of air. He had heard horses scream in pain before. He had heard them call to one another across pastures, heard the high, sharp trumpeting of panic and the soft nicker of curiosity. This was none of those. This sounded like something cracking. The horse tossed its head once, mane flinging water, then swung its head to the side, not away from him, but toward the dark smear of land beyond the road. The motion was quick, precise. Then the animal looked back at him, eyes catching the low light, burning gold. The message landed, simple and incomprehensible all at once. There. Then you. Cole swallowed. Is there another one out there? He asked softly, feeling foolish for speaking English into a storm at a horse. Is that what this is? The big animal shifted its weight, hooves sucking at the mud. It took a single step backward, off the crown of the road, leaving a dark, hoof-shaped crater where it had stood. Rain filled the print almost, instantly. The horse's tail flicked again. Its ears stayed pinned on him, waiting. Cole glanced back at the truck. The cab glowed faintly, lonely and small in the storm. The thought of climbing back in, easing around the animal, pretending he'd never seen any of this, it passed through his mind like a stranger at a bus station. Harmless. Unimportant. He turned away from the truck. Fine, he breathed out, the word carried off by the wind. All right? He clicked the flashlight on. A pale cone of light cut through the rain, bouncing off droplets, catching the slick shine of mud and rock. He took a careful step forward, then another, boots making soft, sucking sounds as he moved. The horse held its ground until he was 10, maybe 12 feet away. Up close, it was even bigger. The curve of the neck, the deep barrel of the chest, the sheer height of it. This was no half-broke ranch horse. This was something the land had made for itself. You're a big one, Cole said under his breath. The animal's nostrils flared. He could see the muscles in its shoulders flutter under the skin, some internal argument between fear and something else, something that kept it there, tethered to the spot by a need larger than its instinct to run. The wind shifted, bringing with it a faint, thin sound. He almost missed it under the hiss of the rain, a small, wavering noise that seemed to float between heartbeats. Not the groan of trees, not the whine of a loose piece of tin. Higher, fragile. A sound that belonged to something small and running out of strength. Cole's chest tightened. There it is, he whispered. The horse heard it, too. Its ears flicked toward the darkness, then back to him. It turned, slow enough for him to see each muscle coil and release, and stepped off the road entirely. Hooves finding a narrow path down the shallow ditch and out onto the open, flooded field beyond. Then it stopped, halfway into the night, and looked back over its shoulder. In the sweep of the flashlight beam, water ran in sheets off its flanks. Its eyes met his again, and for the first time all evening, Cole thought he saw something he recognized there. Not wildness, not rage, recognition, pleading, a father's fear. He drew a breath, feeling the storm in his lungs, the damp in his bones. All right, he said quietly to the great dark shape waiting for him. Show me. And with that, Cole Hartman left the safety of the road and followed the giant horse into the storm. The horse moved with a certainty that didn't belong to the storm. Cole followed at a distance that felt respectful, not wanting to crowd the massive creature, yet unable to turn back. Rain beat against his hat brim and slid down the collar of his coat, gathering at his spine like a cold finger tracing old regrets. The beam of his flashlight shook with each step, cutting a pale tunnel through the downpour that showed him only pieces of the land. Patches of sagebrush bent sideways. By the wind, the silver flash of water running through the grass, the dark arc of the horse's tail swaying just ahead. Titan wasn't rushing, but he wasn't wandering aimlessly either. There was a rhythm to his stride, an unspoken urgency that made Cole lengthen his own steps to keep up. The storm softened as they left the road behind, turning from a violent sheet of water into steady, insistent rain. The thunder rolled farther away, rumbling over the distant ridges like tired giants shifting in their sleep. The air smelled of wet earth and sage, and beneath it, faint but growing clearer, was a scent that made Cole's stomach tighten. Fear. Fear had a smell. He'd known it since boyhood, in rodeo arenas and cattle chutes and nights when storms crashed through the basin. A sharp, metallic tang. A residue of panic. Something was out there, something small and terrified, clinging to life. Titan paused at the shallow dip of a washout, the ground slick and dark beneath the runoff. He looked back at Cole, not in warning, but as if checking that the man was still with him. Rainwater streamed from his mane, carving dark channels along his neck. The brief flash of lightning illuminated his silhouette, all heavy muscle and unwavering focus, as if the storm itself had carved him from shadow and breath. Cole steadied his flashlight and stepped down into the washout, boots sinking deep. The mud clung to him like hands trying to pull him under, but he pushed through, using the flashlight to find solid patches of earth. Titan waited until Cole climbed out the other side, then continued forward. "How the hell do you even know where you're going?" Cole whispered, though the horse couldn't hear him over the storm. The question wasn't meant for Titan anyway. It was meant for the sky, for the memories that tightened in his chest whenever he heard a helpless cry, for the part of him that had sworn he wouldn't get close to another horse again, not after losing Ranger. Yet here he was, following a giant Mustang through a floodlit night like a man answering a summons older than pride. The field stretched wide around them, shimmering with puddles that reflected the pale light. Grass flattened under the weight of the rain, bowing in waves each time the wind rushed over. Titan crossed the field with a sure-footedness that Cole envied. The animal moved as though the earth rose up to meet him. Cole strained to keep up, breath catching as his boots slipped and slid. The mud gripped hard, cold water seeping through the seams. He clenched his jaw and forced his legs onward. Every so often, Titan stopped, not hesitantly, but with intention, tilting his head toward the darkness ahead. Each time, Cole strained to hear something besides the storm, and slowly, between the gusts of wind, the faint sound returned. Weak, fragile, a soft, uneven whimper that didn't belong to any grown animal. A foal's cry. Cole felt something shift inside him. A gravity, pulling him forward, the way memories sometimes did when you least wanted them. He'd heard that sound once before, years ago. A different night, a different storm, a different horse he hadn't been able to save. He shook the thought off and quickened his pace. This wasn't then. This wasn't Ranger. Life was harsh, but it sometimes offered one more chance, one more moment to choose differently. Titan moved faster now, pushing through a thicket of rabbit brush bent low under the weight of the rain. Cole raised his arm to shield his face from brittle branches, ducking under them. When he straightened, the land shifted. The field dipped gently into a small basin ringed by cottonwoods, whose branches swayed like tired arms. The storm had thinned enough that he could make out their gray trunks, gleaming under the rain. Titan stepped into the basin, scanning the shadows. Cole followed, and felt the sound hit him fully this time. A thin, wavering cry. Close. Close enough to make his pulse jump. He swept the flashlight across the basin. The beam caught waterlogged grass, churned dirt. Then, the jagged outline of a fallen tree, its roots twisted upward like claws reaching toward the sky. Titan stopped beside it and lowered his head. Cole swallowed hard and hurried forward. As he approached, the smell changed. Mud, sap, and something sour beneath it. His boots squelched in the soaked earth as he dropped to one knee beside the tree. He angled the flashlight downward. There, half buried under the weight of a thick branch, lay a foal. Its coat, pale as ash, clung to its small frame, soaked completely through. One leg was pinned beneath the branch. Its chest rose in shallow, uneven jerks, each breath a fragile battle. Mud streaked its muzzle. Its eyes fluttered open just long enough to reveal a dull, frightened glimmer before slipping shut again. Cole felt his breath catch. "Oh, kid," he whispered. "You're hanging on by a thread, aren't you?" Titan stepped closer, releasing a soft, guttural rumble that vibrated the air. Cole didn't have to look up to feel the weight of the stallion's fear. It pulsed around them, heavy and raw, like grief trying to stay quiet. The big horse lowered his head until his muzzle hovered just inches above the foal's mane. Rain dripped from his chin, falling gently onto the tiny, trembling body. Cole reached out and touched the wet coat. Cold. Too cold. The foal's breathing stuttered. That thin cry flickered again, quieter this time, as if it had run out of strength. "You brought me to him," Cole murmured to Titan. "You knew." A gust of wind tore through the basin, scattering droplets into the air. Cole blinked them away and pressed his palm against the foal's neck. A faint pulse tapped under his fingers, irregular but present. He slid the flashlight closer, its beam trembling over the injured leg. If he didn't free the foal soon, the cold and shock would finish what the fallen tree hadn't. With slow, deliberate movements, he braced one knee against the ground and reached for the branch. The soaked bark slipped under his fingers. He repositioned, gripped harder, and heaved. Muscles in his shoulders burned, mud sucked at his boots. For a moment, the branch refused to move. Titan snorted, a sharp blast of air, as if urging him on. Cole clenched his teeth and pulled harder. The branch shifted, just an inch, but enough. He planted his feet deeper into the mud and heaved again. This time, it lifted clear, sliding away from the foal's leg with a wet thud. The foal whimpered, curling instinctively. Titan stepped closer, breath coming fast, warm against Cole's cheek. "It's okay," Cole said softly. "I've got him." He eased the foal out from under the tangled debris, arms slipping beneath the frail, shivering body. The little horse's head lolled against his forearm. Up close, Cole could see the faint tremor of its ribs struggling for air, saw the mud clinging to its eyelashes. Titan's nose touched the foal's side, a whisper-light gesture brimming with a father's fear. Cole met the stallion's gaze. Rain blurred the edges of the moment, making everything feel suspended. Two hearts beating in the storm, both depending on the man kneeling in the mud. You did the hard part, Cole whispered to Titan. Now let me do mine. The stallion didn't move. Not away, not forward. Just stood there, massive and silent, trusting him. Cole gathered the foal carefully in his arms, the small weight pressing against his chest. The world beyond the basin seemed farther away now, the storm quieter, the path back somehow longer. But he tightened his hold, rose to his feet, and nodded toward the darkness they had come from. "Come on," he said to Titan. "Let's get him out of here." And as Cole stepped back into the rain, the giant horse fell in beside him. Not behind, not ahead, but close, like a shadow with breath. The wind shifted as Cole climbed up the slick incline of the basin, the foal's small body cradled against his chest. Titan followed so close the stallion's breath warmed the back of Cole's neck in short, uneven bursts. The storm had thinned to a steady rain, but the weight of the night pressed on them as if the sky itself understood how fragile the life in Cole's arms truly was. Each step jarred through him, not from his own exhaustion, but from the trembling he felt in the foal. Tiny, involuntary shivers running through a frame too young to understand what it was fighting. The flashlight beam wavered over the grass, catching glints of water sliding down every blade. The ground was a patchwork of mud and pooled rain that reflected the weak light like shattered mirrors. Cole adjusted his hold, bringing the foal closer, trying to share the warmth of his own body. He could feel the shallow flutter of its breath against his coat, like someone knocking gently at a door no one was sure would open again. "There you go," he murmured, though he wasn't sure the little one could hear him over the storm. "Stay with me." Titan walked ahead for a moment, ears flicking in every direction as if mapping danger in the dark. Then he circled back, brushing Cole's shoulder with his muzzle in a gesture both urgent and strangely tender. Cole steadied himself, feeling the faint tremor of the stallion's concern ripple through the moment. There was no wildness in Titan now, only a pleading quietness, as if the enormous horse understood that his strength was useless against the invisible thread tugging at his child's breaths. The foal uttered a faint sound, barely audible, more exhale than cry. Cole felt it more than he heard it, a soft vibration against his ribs. He angled the flashlight downward, letting the beam sweep over the foal's face. Mud streaked the small muzzle. Rain had flattened the delicate coat to its skin. The eyes opened briefly, unfocused and full of pain, then fluttered shut again, as though even holding on required more strength than it had left. Cole's throat tightened. He knew this place, not the basin, not the storm, but the crossroads between life slipping away and someone begging it not to. He'd stood here once before, on a night colder than this, with a horse he loved like family. That memory still lived in the seams of his bones. "Not tonight," he whispered, voice cracking. "Not this one." Titan stepped beside him again, towering in the wet dark. Rain traced rivers down the stallion's face, catching in the creases around his nostrils. He lowered his head until their shoulders touched. Cole felt the heat beneath the wet coat, sensed the thrum of Titan's heartbeat, fast, uneven, full of a fear the giant creature didn't know how to express, except by staying close enough that Cole could not doubt his desperation. "You did good bringing me here," Cole said quietly. "I know why you didn't run." He shifted the foal higher in his arms and took another careful step forward. The weight wasn't much. Foals were all legs and hope at this age, but the fragility of the small body made it feel heavier than stone. The leg that had been pinned beneath the tree hung limp now, muddy and swollen. Cole bit the inside of his cheek. He'd seen injuries like that, seen how quickly shock could swallow the young. Thunder rolled far off, fading into the ridgeline like a memory losing its shape. The storm's worst had passed, leaving behind that eerie quiet that followed chaos, a quiet in which even a single breath felt enormous. Cole moved through it slowly, boots suctioning into the mud, his entire world shrinking to the warmth inside in his arms and the looming presence beside him. Halfway up the slope, the foal's breathing stuttered again. Cole froze. "Easy," he murmured. "Easy, little one. Don't give up on me." He pressed the foal closer, trying to offer the warmth the storm had robbed from its body. Titan stepped ahead, then pivoted sharply as though sensing the shift. His ears flicked toward the foal. He lowered his head, breathing a soft rush of air over its face. The foal didn't respond. Cole swallowed hard, forcing himself not to panic. "Come on, Ember. Stay awake. Just a little longer." The name fell out before he could catch it. Ember, like the last glow in a fire, refusing to die out. Titan lifted his head slightly, as if he'd recognized something in the tone of Cole's voice. Cole pushed forward again. The basin flattened into a narrow stretch of land where the grass was higher, brushing his knees. Rain hissed softly as it slid from the grass tips. Titan forged ahead, clearing a path with his massive frame. His tail swished once, sending droplets scattering, before he slowed to match Cole's pace again. The foal stirred faintly. Cole exhaled shakily in relief. "There you go. That's it." He didn't know if anyone could hear him. Titan, the foal, the storm. But he kept talking anyway. Words filled the space where fear tried to root itself. Words anchored his hands, his breath, his determination. "You're going to be all right," he said softly. "I didn't come out here for nothing." They reached the edge of the cottonwoods, where the land rose in a gentle slope toward the road. Cole's flashlight beam flashed across the bark, slick, dark, rain-worn. Titan moved beside a gap between two trunks, pausing long enough for Cole to squeeze through. The stallion stood guard, scanning the open field behind them as though expecting the night to lunge forward and snatch his child from Cole's arms. Cole gently readjusted the foal and stepped onto firmer ground. His knees ached. His arms trembled with the strain of holding the foal steady while navigating the uneven terrain. The barn was still far off. The warmth, the dry straw, the medicine, everything the little one needed, waited on the other side of a long, cold walk. The foal's breath hitched again. This time, it didn't recover quickly. "No, no, no, stay with me," Cole whispered, voice fraying. "You hear me? I'm not losing another one out here." Titan moved so close their bodies brushed. The stallion's ears flattened in distress, and he released another low rumble, a sound thick with dread. Cole felt his throat tighten painfully. "We're almost there," he said, more promise than truth. "Just hold on." The foal exhaled a thin, trembling sigh. Its head sank deeper against Cole's arm. For a heartbeat, Cole feared it had slipped past the point of no return. Then, the faintest stir of breath. He closed his eyes in gratitude. When he opened them again, Titan was watching him with an intensity that bordered on human. Rain streaked down the stallion's massive face, tracing lines of worry that didn't belong to an animal governed by instinct alone. "All right," Cole said softly. "Let's get your baby home." He hitched the foal. Higher in his arms, braced his tired legs, and stepped forward into the rain. Titan walked with him, silent, enormous, unyielding, two shadows moving as one across the sodden earth, carrying the last fragile spark of a life that refused to go out. Cole pushed onward through the wet hush of the plains, every step sinking deep into the mud that clung to his boots like a second skin. Ember's small body grew heavier in his arms, not in weight, but in the awful way a living thing could feel lighter when its strength was leaving it. The foal's breaths came thin and uneven, each one a quiet tremor against Cole's chest. Titan stayed no more than a stride behind him, towering like a dark wall of muscle and rain, his presence both a warning and a plea. The storm had settled into a steady fall. No lightning now, just water sliding through the grass in silver threads and dripping from Titan's mane in a rhythm as steady as a heartbeat. The road came back into view, a faint, pale strip through the darkness. Cole angled toward it, careful not to jostle Ember. His arms ached with the strain, but he held the foal close, letting the warmth of his body shield the trembling creature from the cold wind sweeping across the basin. Titan stepped ahead long enough to guide him around a patch of flooded ground, then fell back in beside him, as if refusing to let either of them walk alone. Cole didn't speak. Not yet. Words seemed too heavy, too fragile for the moment. Only the soft thud of his steps and the low rumble of Titan's breath filled the darkness. Halfway up the gentle rise toward the road, the foal stirred. It wasn't much, just a faint twitch of the ear, a small shift of weight, but it made Cole's breath catch in relief. "Easy," he whispered, his voice barely more than an exhale. "You're still with me." Titan flicked an ear toward him, then toward the foal, and lowered his head until his muzzle brushed Cole's sleeve in a fleeting, desperate gesture. It wasn't a command. It wasn't fear. It felt like trust. Raw, fragile, trembling the way the foal trembled. Cole steadied himself and kept moving. The rain softened enough that he could hear the foal's breath again, faint and quivering. Titan let out a sound that was neither a whinny nor a snort, more like a broken hum, low enough to vibrate in Cole's bones. The giant stallion pressed close, matching every slow step, as if the three of them formed one battered, unsteady creature that the night had not managed to break. At the crest of the rise, the headlights of Cole's abandoned truck glowed through the storm like two tired eyes waiting for him. The sight of them should have brought relief. It didn't. Ember's breaths hitched again, shallow and uneven, the rhythm slipping. Cole halted, adjusting the foal carefully, feeling the small heartbeat flutter like a bird trapped against his ribs. "Come on, kid," he whispered. "Stay with me just a little longer." Titan moved closer, so close the stallion's shoulder brushed his arm. Cole could feel the tension coiled in the massive body, fear running down its muscles like electricity. Titan lowered his head until his muzzle was almost touching the foal's flank. He let out a slow exhale, warm and shaking. Cole swallowed hard. "You're doing good," he said to the stallion, unsure whether he was reassuring Titan or himself. "You got me to him. That's more than most men would have done." Lightning flickered far off, just a pale flash behind the hills, a reminder that the world was larger than the struggle happening in Cole's arms. Ember's head shifted slightly, his ear twitching once. His breath quivered, there, then gone for a second too long before it came back, thin and strained. Cole felt panic climb up his throat like a hand gripping from the inside. "No," he whispered, voice cracking. "Not yet. Don't you go yet." Titan's rumble deepened, a trembling vibration that seemed to come from somewhere older than instinct. He stepped around Cole in a slow arc, positioning himself between man and wind, blocking the storm's chill with the breadth of his body. Cole felt the sudden warmth at his side, the shelter of the stallion's presence heavy and steady. He turned into it, letting the moment anchor him. Rain pattered along Titan's dark coat, the sound soft and rhythmic, almost soothing. A gust of wind swept across the rise, rattling the sagebrush lining the ditch. Ember whimpered then, a fragile sound, but a sound nonetheless. Cole pressed a hand gently against the foal's neck, feeling the weak pulse flutter beneath his palm. "That's it," he murmured. "Fight. Just a little more." Titan nudged Cole's shoulder, not roughly, but with a deliberate pressure that made Cole meet the stallion's eyes. They glowed like molten amber in the faint beam of the flashlight, eyes full of terror and trust, full of the heavy question no man had ever been asked by a wild creature before. Save him. Cole tightened his hold on the foal and nodded once. "I will." The words weren't loud, yet they seemed to settle into the air between them like a vow. Rain softened as they reached the truck. Cole pulled open the back door with one hand, then knelt, lowering Ember onto the worn blanket he kept there. The foal curled instinctively, small legs folding awkwardly as he let out a trembling exhale. Titan hovered at the edge of the truck bed, his enormous frame barely fitting in the glow of the headlights. He leaned forward until his muzzle nearly touched the foal's ear. Ember responded with the weakest flick, a whisper of recognition. Titan let out a sound so soft Cole felt it more than heard it, a single breath that carried all the fear of a father watching his last hope flicker in the wind. Cole brushed the mud from the foal's face with the side of his hand. The cold had seeped deep into Ember's body, but there was still warmth at the base of the neck, still a small echo of life pulsing under the soaked coat. "Hang on," he whispered. "We're not done yet." He looked at Titan. The stallion didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there in the rain as if rooted to the earth by something stronger than instinct. Love, maybe, or desperation, or the thin thread of faith binding them all to this night. Cole felt the weight of the moment settle into him. It wasn't a burden. It was a calling. He closed the truck door gently, running a hand over the metal as if sealing a promise. Titan stepped forward, pressing his forehead to the door for a moment, a gesture heavier than any spoken word. Cole reached up and laid his hand against the wet, powerful jaw. "I'll take care of him," he said softly. Titan exhaled, warm breath fogging the cold air between them. Cole climbed into the driver's seat, the truck engine shuddering to life with a reluctant growl. When he looked in the side mirror, Titan was still there, massive, silent, unwavering, standing in the downpour like a sentinel carved from the storm itself. "Stay close," Cole whispered, though he wasn't sure if the stallion could hear him through the glass. But Titan stepped forward, hooves sinking into the mud, keeping pace beside the truck as Cole turned toward home, and whatever fragile hope waited there. The truck rattled up the last stretch of the muddy rise, its engine growling like an old dog pushed too far. Cole kept one hand braced on Ember's small body in the back seat, steadying the foal every time the tires slipped. Titan followed along the roadside like a dark river at full force, his stride long and relentless despite the storm-drenched earth. The stallion's silhouette rose and fell beside the truck window, breath puffing against the cold night air, as if he were pushing the vehicle forward with sheer will. Cole stole glances at him, unable to fathom how a creature built from thunder and sinew could wear fear in such a quiet, devastating way. As the truck's headlights crested the final hill before his property, The world shifted. Another set of headlights cut through the rain from the opposite direction, bright white beams sweeping across the wet pasture. Cole's stomach clenched, not from fear, but from the sudden intrusion of human presence into the fragile space that had formed around him and Titan. The approaching lights slowed, then angled into his driveway. He recognized the shape even before the red and blue striping on the door came into view. Sheriff Lyle Cooper. Behind him, a second vehicle rolled in, the vet's old truck, its wipers struggling against the steady rainfall. Dr. Rhea Donovan stepped out before the engine fully stopped, her hood pulled tight, and her bag already in hand. Cole hadn't called them, but the storm had a way of carrying word across the basin, and Lyle never ignored a truck left on the road with the driver nowhere in sight. Cole slipped out of the driver's seat, careful not to slam the door. Titan stopped beside him instantly, towering over him like a shadow made of breath and rain. Lyle approached with his hand hovering near the tranquilizer holster at his hip, boots sinking into the wet gravel. "Cole," he called over the wind, squinting at the massive stallion. "Step away from the horse." Titan's ears flattened. A low, vibrating growl rumbled in his chest, too deep to be a whinny, too alive to be wind. Cole raised one hand without turning, keeping his voice calm. "Easy, big man. He's with me." "With you?" Lyle repeated, incredulous. His boots stopped mid-step. His gaze darted from Cole to Titan, then to the back door of the truck. "You mind telling me why you've got a wild Mustang tailing you like he's on your payroll? And what the hell is in your truck?" Before Cole could answer, Rhea reached the truck bed and pulled open the door. Her breath caught as she saw Ember curled in a trembling heap on the blanket. She moved instantly. No hesitation. No wasted motion. "Cole, get him inside. Now!" Her voice was steady, but urgency pulsed beneath every word. Titan took a step forward, massive hooves splashing in the mud. Rhea froze, realizing for the first time how close he was. "Lord above," she whispered. "That thing's built like a tractor." The stallion's nostrils flared, eyes locked onto her every movement. She raised her hands slowly, palms open. "I'm here to help," she murmured, though her voice wavered. Cole stepped between them, feeling the stallion's chest brush his back. "Titan," he said softly. The name came out without thought, but hearing it seemed to ground the big horse. Titan's ears twitched, his breath steadied. He lowered his head just enough that his muzzle hovered by Cole's shoulder, warm in the cold rain. Lyle let out a slow breath. "Well, I'll be damned. He actually listens to you." "He trusts me," Cole replied, still watching Titan closely. "That's the only reason we're all still standing." Rhea knelt beside the open truck door, examining Ember with practiced hands. "He's in shock," she said quietly. "Cold, dehydrated, and that leg—" Her voice faded. She looked up at Cole, her eyes measuring the truth before she spoke it. "If we don't warm him up and get fluids in him within the hour, he won't make it." Titan loosed a trembling sound, a grieving rumble that made Lyle's hand drop completely away from his holster. Cole's chest tightened. "Okay," he said. "We do it in the barn. It's warmer than the house and closer." Rhea nodded and reached into the truck. Ember whimpered as she lifted him, the tiny body almost disappearing in her arms. Titan surged forward with a desperate thrust of his neck, and Lyle, reacting on instinct, yanked his tranquilizer halfway free. "No!" Cole's shout cut through the rain. Titan froze, but not because of Lyle. because Cole stepped into the stallion's path, chest to broad muzzle, hands raised but steady. Titan's breath fanned his face, hot and shaking. Cole didn't move, didn't blink, didn't break the fragile connection forged in the storm. "He's helping your boy," Cole murmured, voice low, grounding. "Let her take him. Let us save him." For a moment, the world held still. The storm, the wind, the rain-laced night. Titan lowered his head, almost touching the soaked ground. It wasn't surrender. It was something harder, something heavier, allowing someone else to hold what mattered most. Rhea carried Ember toward the barn, stepping carefully over the slick path. Titan followed, no longer the unstoppable force he'd been on the plains, but something softer, stretched thin with fear. Cole walked beside him, his own heartbeat matching the stallion's uneven breaths. Inside the barn, the warm air smelled of hay, old wood, and the faint sweetness of feed. Rhea laid Ember gently onto a bed of fresh straw, her hands moving fast as she unpacked her kit. Titan stood at the entrance, massive shoulders trembling, refusing to cross the threshold but refusing to leave either. His presence filled the doorway, a living barrier against the world. Cole knelt beside Ember, brushing the damp hair from the foal's small forehead. Rhea slid an IV line into place, with a precision that came from years of midnight emergencies. Ember stirred weakly, a thin breath escaping him like a question too fragile to ask. "You hang on," Cole whispered, his thumb stroking gently over the tiny pulse at the foal's neck. "You've got someone out there who'd break the world in half for you." Outside, Titan rumbled again, soft, aching, a sound that made Rhea pause in her work. "That's not a sound a wild horse should make," she murmured. Cole didn't look up. "He's not just wild." The foal shifted, breath hitching, and then settling into a fragile rhythm. Rhea kept her hands moving, checking vitals, adjusting the line, wiping mud from Ember's flank. Lyle stood near the wall, hat in hand, watching with the quiet reverence of someone witnessing something too intimate to interrupt. Minutes passed. Long, heavy, trembling minutes. Then Ember breathed deeper. Just once. But enough. Cole exhaled shakily, bowing his head. Titan took one step closer to the barn door, leaning in as far as his frame allowed, his breath brushing Ember's mane. "Come on, little Ember," Cole murmured. "You're not done burning yet." Outside, the rain softened to a whisper, as if the storm itself had stepped back to let the fragile moment breathe. The barn settled into a hush that didn't match the weather outside. Rain still tapped against the roof, but in here the world felt smaller, drawn inward around the fragile rise and fall of Ember's chest. Rhea worked with quiet precision, laying out gauze, warming fluids between her palms, checking the foal's pulse with fingers, steady from years of midnight emergencies. Titan stood just beyond the doorframe, too large to enter but too desperate to leave. Every few seconds he leaned closer, breath brushing the straw, as though he could anchor the foal's life by sheer will alone. Cole kneeled near Ember, elbows braced on his knees, hands clasped so tightly the bones ached. He'd been here before, kneeling beside a horse fighting for breath. But tonight, the air felt different. There was no roar of an arena, no dust, no echoing shouts, just the soft creak of the barn rafters and the rhythmic click of Rhea's equipment. And Titan's presence, massive and trembling, filling the entryway like a prayer swallowed by rain. Rhea lifted Ember's front leg gently, her brows knitting. "Cole," she said quietly, "hand me the flashlight." He passed it to her, and she angled the beam toward the foal's mud-caked foreleg. The barn's golden light wasn't enough to show the full truth, but the flashlight was. The mud, once brushed aside, revealed a deep abrasion circling the leg. Torn hair, swollen skin, a thin ridge of broken flesh. "That's not an injury from a tree," she murmured. Cole leaned in, breath catching. "What is it?" Rhea traced the wound with a careful fingertip. "This is from a metal loop. Something tight enough to cut when the animal struggles." She inhaled slowly. "A snare, wire, maybe even a cable tie." Lyle cursed under his breath from the far wall. "Poachers!" The word hung in the air like smoke. Titan let out a sharp grunt, a wounded, furious sound that made Ember tremble in response. Cole placed a calming hand on the foal's neck. The little body twitched under his palm, breath fluttering like a trapped bird. Titan lowered his head until his forehead nearly touched the barn door frame, ears pinned forward in raw vigilance. Rhea met Cole's gaze. "He didn't get hurt by the storm. This is man-made." Cole swallowed the rising anger tightening his throat. "Someone snared a foal?" His voice cracked in disbelief. "A baby?" "Mustang poachers don't care if it's young," Lyle muttered. "They don't care about anything but a quick dollar." The barn seemed to shrink at his words, the air thickening with the weight of what had happened out there in the dark. Cole looked back at Titan. The stallion's chest rose and fell in quick, uneven bursts, his fear morphing into something colder, rage. But beneath it, the same plea remained. "Save him. Please." Cole took a slow breath and spoke softly. "He's going to need stitches, right?" "And fluids," Rhea said, already prepping her tools. "Pain meds, antibiotics, heat, and a lot of luck." She glanced at Titan again. "But he's a fighter. He's held on longer than most would." Titan's ears twitched at the tone of her voice. He pressed forward again, but his hooves hesitated at the threshold, caught between instinct to protect and the old fear that stepping too close to humans might spell danger. "Let him be close," Cole murmured. Rhea nodded and shifted her body just enough that Titan could see every movement she made. "All right, big guy. Watch me if you need to. I'm not hurting him." As she cleaned the wound, Ember whimpered, a tiny broken sound that made Titan jerk forward sharply. Cole moved without thinking, rising to place both hands on the stallion's damp neck. "Easy, Titan. She's helping him. He needs this." Titan froze, muscles trembling under Cole's palms. The stallion's breath puffed against Cole's cheek. Warm and shaking. Slowly, the giant animal eased back, settling into a rigid stillness that felt more disciplined than natural. Cole realized something then. This wasn't wildness at all. It was discipline learned from pain, the same way people learned to stand still for the doctor even when it hurt. Rhea worked quickly, threading the needle with efficient hands. "This leg, if the cut had been deeper, he wouldn't have made it to tonight." Cole's stomach twisted. "He almost didn't." The foal stirred, a small spasm jolting through his body. Titan's head dipped so low his mane brushed the straw. Cole steadied Ember's neck, murmuring soothing words until the tremor passed. The barn grew warmer as the kerosene heater ticked in the corner, pumping soft heat into the stale air. As Rhea stitched the wound, Lyle paced a short line near the tack wall, jaw tight. "I've been getting rumors about tracks up near the old Fitch property," he muttered. "Lights in the hills, noise at all hours. I thought it was just teenagers." He shook his head. "Maybe I was wrong." Cole's voice came out low. "You think someone's running a Mustang ring?" Lyle rubbed his forehead, eyes clouded with regret. "Wouldn't be the first time. Wouldn't be the last if we don't shut it down." Cole looked at Ember, breathing shallowly, stitched leg resting gently on the straw, and then at Titan, who had shifted closer so his breath warmed the foal's flank. "Someone nearly killed this kid." "Someone knew exactly what they were doing," Rhea said softly. "A snare like that isn't an accident." The barn door rattled under a gust of wind. Titan's head jerked toward the sound, protective instincts flaring. Cole placed a calming hand on his shoulder again, feeling the raw power rippling under his palm. The stallion relaxed only when he saw nothing approaching but rain. Rhea finished the stitches, wiped her brow, and sat back on her heels. "We're not out of danger," she said quietly. "He needs rest, warmth, fluids, and time." Time. Cole knew that was the one thing you couldn't buy, beg for, or steal. Time either gave or it didn't. He reached down, slid his hand under Ember's cheek, and whispered, "Stay. Just stay." The foal stirred under his touch, a tiny flicker of breath that brushed Cole's skin like a promise too small to name. Titan responded with a low hum, softer than any sound he'd made all night, something closer to a lullaby than a plea. Cole watched the exchange, the fragile tether between father and son, and something inside his chest shifted. Not all the way, just enough to remind him that some things, like trust, weren't built in storms. They were built afterward, in the quiet, when someone stayed. Rhea stood and exhaled. He might make it. Cole closed his eyes, relief washing over him like warmth from inside out. Titan released a long, trembling breath, heavy with hope and exhaustion, the sound of a creature who had been holding back the world with his bare will. Dawn never truly broke the next morning. Instead, a pale gray glow seeped over the Wyoming plains like a bruise spreading under the skin. The storm had passed hours earlier, but its memory clung to the land, wet earth, crushed sagebrush, and a quiet so complete it felt cautious. Cole stepped out of the barn with stiff shoulders and eyes stinging from a night without sleep. Behind him, Ember lay curled in the straw under a blanket, breathing more steadily now. Rhea had stayed until just before sunrise, leaving him with instructions, a syringe of pain medication, and a look that said she trusted him more than he trusted himself. Titan had not moved all night. The giant stallion stood just outside the barn door, front hooves sunk into the softened earth as though he'd rooted himself there. When Cole emerged, Titan lifted his head, mane tangled with dried rain, and let out a low, exhausted sound. Cole approached slowly, resting a hand on the stallion's warm neck. "He's hanging on," he murmured. Titan blinked once, a slow, heavy acknowledgement, before turning his gaze toward the horizon, as if scanning for something only he could sense. Cole followed the stallion's line of sight. The hills beyond his property glinted faintly in the muted light, their slopes dotted with patches of scrub and dark, sodden earth. Somewhere out there, the people who had set that snare were still moving in the shadows. And Cole felt something stir inside him, something sharp-edged and quiet, a resolve shaped not by anger, but by a deeper, older instinct. Protect what you've been handed. Lyle's truck rumbled onto the property, tires crunching over the gravel. The sheriff stepped out, still wearing last night's clothes, the exhaustion etched into the lines around his eyes. "Morning," he said, voice rough. Titan watched him without moving, as if the stallion had filed Lyle under not a threat, but not family either. Lyle adjusted his hat and glanced toward the barn. "How's the little one?" "Holding on," Cole said. "For now." Lyle nodded. He didn't smile. "I've been thinking about what Rhea found. About that snare." He lifted his chin toward the hills. "If you're up for it, I want to check the old Fitch place. Haven't been out there in months. Too many barns. Too many places someone could hide something." Cole wiped a hand across his face. "You think it's connected?" "I think," Lyle said slowly, "that nobody leaves a snare like that near someone's property unless they're working fast, sloppy, and close." Titan snorted sharply, stomping one hoof. Cole glanced at him. "He wants to come," he muttered. "You can't be serious," Lyle whispered, eyes wide. "Cole, that horse will tear through the cab of my truck like a can opener." "I'm not talking about the truck." Cole stepped toward the barn to grab his coat. "I'll ride out with you on foot." Lyle's jaw tightened. "You haven't slept." "That doesn't matter." Cole shrugged the coat on, the worn leather still stiff from last night's rain. "Someone hurt that foal." He paused, looking back at Titan. "Someone made that stallion desperate enough to find a man in a storm." He held Lyle's gaze. "I'm not letting that go." There was a long silence before Lyle said, "All right, but we do this smart." They set out on foot, Titan trailing beside Cole, with a stride that made the sheriff uneasy enough to keep glancing sideways. The morning air was still damp, carrying the faint metallic scent of wet earth. Cole's boots squished in the softened ground, each step sinking slightly. Titan walked silently, except for the faint thud of his hooves, his ears flicking with constant alertness. It took nearly 20 minutes to reach the old fence line, marking the beginning of the abandoned Fitch property. Weeds overtook the posts, and the gate hung crookedly, one hinge rusted through. Titan sniffed the air, nostrils flaring. Cole followed the stallion's gaze to a cluster of weather-worn buildings, half hidden by a cluster of cottonwoods, a collapsed barn, a leaning shed, and a long, narrow structure with its door yawning open like a mouth waiting for an answer. Lyle unsnapped the strap over his holster. "If anyone's holed up in there, they might not appreciate company." Cole felt Titan press his shoulder lightly. A guiding touch, almost. "He thinks we should start with the shed," Cole murmured. Lyle hesitated. "How do you know?" Cole didn't answer. He just stepped toward the shed, Titan falling into place beside him. The door was warped, swollen from last night's storm. Cole pushed it open, hinges shrieking like something dying. The smell hit them first, rust, old hay, and the sour tang of animals kept under stress. Lyle raised his flashlight, the beam cutting through dimness thick with dust. Rotted beams hung overhead, cobwebs dancing in the slight breeze that followed them in. But it wasn't the decay that made Cole stop. It was the drag marks carved into the dirt floor. Long, fresh, uneven, as though something or someone had been pulled across the ground recently. Lyle crouched low, touching the disturbed earth. "Hooves," he whispered. "Small ones." Titan stepped farther into the shed, lowering his head to sniff the ground. Cole barely breathed. The stallion followed a specific line, one worn path stretching from the drag marks to the back wall. And then Titan stopped cold. Cole knelt where the stallion's gaze landed. There, half buried in the dirt, was a broken piece of cable, twisted, frayed, still carrying a faint smear of mud and hair too pale to belong to Titan. White, or ash gray, ember's color. Cole's hands curled into fists. "They took him from here," he whispered. "He got free, but not before." The rest of the sentence died on his tongue. Titan rumbled softly, the sound deep and guttural, vibrating through the floorboards like thunder trapped underground. Lyle stood slowly. "We're dealing with poachers," he said, "and not the kind who make mistakes. This is organized. Someone's rounding up Mustangs, probably moving them at night to avoid the feds. This," he gestured to the cable, "isn't for just one foal." The shed seemed to shrink around them. Cole swallowed the bitter taste of dread. "How many?" "Too many," Lyle muttered. "We need to check the main barn." Cole nodded, rising to his feet. Titan followed instantly, pressing close enough that Cole felt the warmth radiating off the stallion's flank. They stepped out into the gray morning and toward the largest building, the one with the open door yawning like a cavern. The air grew colder as they approached. Titan halted at the threshold, ears pinned flat, nostrils flaring in alarm. Cole felt the change immediately, a tension winding through the stallion like a drawn bowstring. Lyle raised his flashlight again, fingers tightening around the grip. "Whatever's in here," the sheriff warned softly. "It's not good." They stepped inside. The smell was stronger here, sharper. Cole recognized it instantly, though he wished he didn't. Fear. Not human fear. Horse fear. Rows of crude holding pens lined the left wall, their boards splintered from repeated impacts, feed buckets overturned, rope frayed, a water trough knocked sideways, and in the back corner a pile of metal traps, some open, some twisted, some still carrying strands of Mustang hair. Cole's throat constricted. "They were keeping a whole herd," he whispered. Lyle's jaw tightened. Days, maybe hours, ahead of us. Titan released a pained cry, short, sharp, shuddering. The sound ricocheted through the barn like a wound echoing through hollow bones. Cole placed a hand on the stallion's neck, grounding them both. Titan leaned into him, the full weight of the giant creature trembling. "We're going to find them," Cole said, voice low. "And we're going to make sure they never do this again." Lyle stepped forward and crouched beside a patch of fresh footprints. "They've been here recently. We might still have time." Cole nodded, gaze locked on the empty pens, the scars on the wood, the evidence of terror carved into every corner of the barn. Titan exhaled sharply, a sound filled with grief and rage. And Cole felt something inside him settle. Not anger, not vengeance. Resolve. Evening settled over the Wyoming basin with the slow, deliberate hush of a world preparing itself for something it didn't entirely understand. The sky faded from bruised lavender to a deep, watchful blue, the kind of twilight that made every sound seem sharper, every shadow more honest. Cole stood outside the barn, hands braced on the railing, staring toward the hills where the old Fitch property sat hidden by scrub and distance. Titan stood beside him like a piece of the landscape carved from dusk, his breath rising in slow clouds that drifted into the cooling air. Behind them, Ember slept beneath a lamp's gentle glow, his breaths steadier now, still fragile, still unsure, but alive. Rhea had checked on him before heading home, leaving Cole with a list of instructions, and a squeeze on his shoulder she didn't try to turn into words. Lyle had gone to assemble what little backup he could trust on short notice. "Don't do anything stupid," he'd warned Cole with a tired look. "Wait for my call." Cole had nodded then. But standing here now, in the shifting quiet, he knew waiting wasn't an option. The poachers weren't hiding in that abandoned barn because they were patient. They were hiding because they were moving fast. And if there were more horses still alive, they wouldn't be for long. Titan lifted his head suddenly, ears pricking toward the hills. Cole stiffened. A faint hum trembled through the air, distant, mechanical, deliberate. Not wind, not thunder. An engine, a truck, its sound muffled by distance and brush, but growing louder. Cole whispered, "They're moving." Titan stepped forward, muscles rippling beneath his dark coat. His hoof struck the ground once, sharp and certain. It wasn't fear or rage. It was readiness. Cole took a deep breath and turned toward the barn door. "I'm not leaving Ember alone," he murmured. But Titan was already moving toward the open field, glancing back only once, as if asking whether Cole really believed he could stay behind now, after everything the stallion had trusted him with. The choice wasn't a choice at all. Cole grabbed his coat, the flashlight, and the heavy fence tool he sometimes carried on long nights. He checked Ember one last time, brushing a hand gently through the foal's soft, uneven mane. "I'll be back," he whispered. "I promise." The foal stirred faintly in his sleep, as though he felt the words more than heard them. Cole stepped outside. Titan fell in beside him. They crossed the pasture in silence, guided more by instinct than sight. The moon slid out from behind a bank of clouds, washing the grass in pale silver. With every step uphill, the faint hum of the engine grew clearer, accompanied now by the dull clatter of metal and short, irritated shouts carried on the wind. Poachers! Cole slowed at the ridge, crouching low behind a cluster of rabbit brush. Titan stopped instantly, as though he understood the need for silence. His wide flank pressed close, steady and warm in the cool night. Below them, through a break in the trees, the Fitch clearing came into view. Once empty, now lit by a pair of flood lamps strapped to a truck's roof. 4 men moved through the clearing, their shadows long and sharp. 2 stood near makeshift pens, crude wood and wire traps that held 3 terrified mustangs inside. The horses paced frantically, bumping into each other, their eyes wide and reflecting the harsh lights. Another man loaded metal snares into the back of the truck. The 4th spoke into a radio, pacing with restless energy. Cole felt something cold settle in his stomach. These weren't amateurs. These were organized, equipped, and unafraid. Beside him, Titan's breath quickened. The stallion's entire body tensed, muscles vibrating like a bowstring stretched too tight. The pen nearest the men held a mare, silver gray, her sides streaked with blood where rope had rubbed against her ribs. Titan's ears flattened. His body leaned forward. "Easy," Cole whispered, laying a hand on the stallion's neck. "We need to think." But Titan was not thinking. Titan was remembering. The mare let out a desperate cry, high, broken, the unmistakable sound of a mother calling into a dark she couldn't fight. Titan answered. Not loud, not wild. A deep, haunting rumble rolled from his chest, vibrating through Cole's hand. The men froze. One swung the floodlight toward the hill. Cole grabbed Titan's mane and pressed low, forcing both of them into the brush before the beam reached them. His heart hammered so hard he could feel it in his teeth. "Damn coyotes," one man muttered, turning the light away. The others laughed and went back to work. Cole exhaled shakily. Titan didn't move. Then something shifted in the air, a feeling more than a sound. Cole felt it before he understood it. Titan was done waiting. The stallion stepped out of the brush with a sudden fluid motion that made the night itself seem to hesitate. Cole hissed, grabbing at his coat sleeve. Too late. Titan's massive frame broke through the last of the tall grass and moved downhill, silent as a shadow, unstoppable as a storm front. Cole scrambled. "Titan! Titan, no!" But the stallion didn't look back. He didn't need to. Cole cursed under his breath and sprinted after him, keeping low, mind racing. The men were armed. Maybe with tranquilizers. Maybe with worse. Titan was heading straight toward them, drawn not by rage but by a primal, aching call. Cole hit the lower slope just as the first man noticed the moving shadow. "What the?" Titan exploded into the clearing, not charging, not attacking, but making himself enormous, rearing half a foot taller than any wild Mustang they had ever sent taken. Floodlights illuminated him in stark white flashes, a monstrous silhouette of power and fury. His forehooves sliced the air, his scream ripping through the clearing with a rawness that drowned out every other sound. Chaos erupted. Two men stumbled backward, tripping over their own equipment. One dropped a snare. Another grabbed a tranquilizer rifle, hands shaking so badly the muzzle wavered in every direction. Cole sprinted into the clearing, shouting, "Don't shoot! Don't!" But Titan had already shifted his weight, landing with a force that rattled the metal pens. The captive mare cried out again. Titan whipped toward her, slamming his shoulder against the pen's corner, splintering the wood. The men cursed and scattered. Cole grabbed the nearest man by the arm, wrenching the tranquilizer rifle away before he could steady it. "Drop it," Cole growled. "Now!" The man's eyes widened when he recognized him. "Hartman, you're—" But Cole cut him off with a shove that sent the man staggering back. Titan struck the pen again, and wood burst apart in a spray of shards. The mare bolted free, her hooves tearing across the clearing. The other two Mustangs followed, panicked and wild, vanishing into the darkness like ghosts freed from chains. With the pens ruined and the horses fleeing, the poachers scrambled toward their truck. Titan lunged forward, not to attack, but to position himself between the men and the direction the herd had escaped. His presence alone was enough. The men wanted no part of the beast before them. Cole, panting hard, stepped between Titan and the poachers, raising both hands. "That's enough," he said to the stallion, breathless. "You did it. They're gone." Titan didn't move, not until the mare's distant cry echoed once more across the open field. A softer call this time. Safe. Alive. Only then did Titan lower his head, the tension leaking from his massive frame in a long, shaking exhale. Cole pressed a hand against the stallion's shoulder. "Come on," he whispered. "We need to get back to Ember." Titan nickered once, quiet, tired, and full of something that made Cole's throat tighten. Hope. Real hope. They left the clearing as the poachers scrambled into their truck and sped into the night, their operation shattered, their captives freed. Titan didn't look back once. Cole did. Only long enough to commit the clearing to memory, a promise etched into shadow. Then he followed Titan into the darkness, toward the barn, where a foal waited for dawn. The first warmth of sunrise slipped across the Wyoming plains, like someone pulling a soft blanket over the land. It wasn't a dramatic dawn. No fiery streaks of orange, no triumphant light. Instead, it crept gently across the wet grass, touching each blade with a quiet kind of mercy. Cole walked toward the barn with Titan beside him, both moving with the slow exhaustion of survivors returning from a night they weren't meant to endure. Neither spoke, not that Titan could, but their steps fell in the same rhythm, as if they had walked together for years instead of hours. The barn door groaned softly when Cole pushed it open. Warmth met him immediately. Soft, steady heat from the kerosene lamp Rhea had set up, mixed with the earthy scent of straw. Ember lay where they'd left him, curled beneath a thick blanket, his small body rising and falling with breaths that were deeper now. Not strong, not steady, but alive in a way that pulled something loose in Cole's chest. Relief washed through him so suddenly he had to steady himself on the frame. Titan stepped forward, massive head ducking through the doorway. He didn't force his way in. He simply hovered, breath drifting over the straw. Ember stirred faintly, whiskers twitching. Titan let out a barely there hum, low and warm, and for the first time since the storm, Ember's ear flicked in response. Cole knelt beside the foal, brushing a hand along the soft curve of his neck. "You're tougher than you look," he murmured. "Your old man would have knocked down half the county to get you back. You know that, don't you?" Titan huffed softly, as though answering for the foal. Rhea arrived mid-morning, her truck crunching over gravel. She walked into the barn with her sleeves rolled up, hair tied in a messy knot, and an expression carved from cautious hope. "Let me guess," she said, dropping her bag beside Cole. "You didn't rest." Cole shook his head. Neither did he. He gestured toward Titan. Rhea's gaze softened as she studied the stallion. "Most Mustangs don't stick around once they're young or safe. But he—" She shook her head in quiet wonder. "He's different." Titan lowered his head again, brushing his muzzle near Ember's mane. Rhea watched for a moment before kneeling beside the foal, checking the stitches, pulse, hydration. Her movements were slow and thoughtful, as if she understood that anything loud might disturb the fragile peace the foal had earned. "He's still weak," she said softly. "But he's improving. He'll need a protected space for a while, somewhere quiet. Somewhere his father can see him, but not reach him until the leg heals." Cole nodded. "I'll clear out the far stall. It's solid, warm, and Titan can stay outside the door." Rhea gave him a look, half teasing, half serious. "You know you're not responsible for every animal that wanders onto your property, right?" Cole didn't answer immediately. He looked at Ember. The slow breaths, the faint twitch of tiny hooves, the long road ahead. Then he looked at Titan, the depth in his amber eyes, the steady vigilance in the way he held himself. Finally, he said quietly, "I am responsible for this one." Rhea didn't argue. Together, they moved Ember to the far stall, layering fresh straw and adjusting the heat lamp to warm without drying his coat. Cole worked in silence, hands steady, even though fatigue tugged at every muscle. Titan followed each step, eyes never drifting far from the foal. Once Ember was settled, Cole leaned against the wooden rail of the stall. Rhea stood beside him, arms crossed, studying him with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "You're different today," she said softly. Cole looked at her, brow raised. "Different how?" "Like someone who finally remembers what they're capable of." He exhaled, not sure how to respond. So he didn't. Instead, he watched Titan lower himself onto the packed dirt by the stall door. Slowly, heavily, with the weary grace of a creature who had spent the night fighting his own helplessness. The stallion folded his legs beneath him and rested his massive head near the threshold. He couldn't reach Ember, but he could feel him. That was enough. Hours passed. Ember slept. Titan kept watch. Rhea eventually headed home, instructing Cole to call her if the foal's breathing changed by even a whisper. Cole promised he would. By late afternoon, the sun warmed the barn roof enough that a soft creaking echoed through the rafters. Cole sat on an overturned bucket, elbows on his knees, watching Titan doze lightly. The stallion's breaths were long and full, a stark contrast to Ember's uneven rhythms. Every so often, Titan's ear twitched toward the foal, responding to sounds Cole couldn't hear. The peace didn't last long. Lyle returned, boots heavy on the barn floor. "We got the site secured," he said, leaning against a post. "No sign of the poachers. They're long gone. But we've seized equipment, tracks, evidence, enough to build a case." Cole nodded. "Good." Lyle shifted awkwardly, glancing at Titan, then Ember, then back at Cole. "Look, what you did last night, most men wouldn't have risked it." "I didn't risk it," Cole replied quietly. "Titan did." Titan stirred at the sound of his name, his eyes opening just enough to acknowledge the conversation. Lyle lowered his voice. "I'm putting in a request for federal investigators. This is bigger than just us." Cole nodded again. "And Cole," Lyle added, "you've got away with that horse. Don't waste it." He left before Cole could respond. As evening approached, Titan rose slowly, joints stiff from the long vigil. He stepped to the stall door, pressing his muzzle gently against the wood. Ember responded with a tiny sound, thin but alive. Cole stepped beside Titan, resting his hand against the stallion's warm neck. "He's got a long road," he murmured. "But he's got you. That counts for something." Titan exhaled softly, his breath brushing over Cole's wrist. The barn lights cast a gentle glow over them all, the foal fighting his quiet battle, the father who had crossed a storm to save him, the man who had been chosen without asking. Cole felt something settle inside him, a quiet acceptance that this moment, this barn, this fragile life, were bound to him now in a way he didn't need to question. Outside, the plains darkened into soft blue shadows, and the first stars pushed through the velvet sky. Titan didn't leave his place by the stall, and Cole didn't leave Titan. Both of them stayed, because sometimes staying was the only way to save what mattered. The first frost of autumn settled over the Wyoming plains like a sigh drawn from somewhere ancient. It glazed the tops of the tall grass with silver, softened the edges of the world, and carried the kind of chill that made a man breathe slower, think quieter. Cole stepped out of the small cabin he'd built beside the sanctuary pens, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long since stopped steaming. The years had taught him that mornings like this didn't need heat to matter. They just needed stillness. The sanctuary had grown in the months since he brought Ember home. A few rescued mustangs grazed lazily in the far paddock, their coats thickening for the coming winter. A red-tailed hawk perched on the fence post, preening its feathers with slow, deliberate strokes. And somewhere near the edge of the property, he could hear the soft shuffle of hooves. Ember, now healthy and taller, pushing the boundaries of his pen like any young horse eager to outrun the world. Titan was nowhere in sight. That didn't worry Cole anymore. The stallion came and went like a wandering star, appearing only when the land itself seemed to whisper his name. Sometimes days passed without a trace of him on the ridge, but Cole knew better than to mistake absence for distance. Titan was out there, watching the way the wild watched, without hurry, without need, without fear. Cole took a long sip from the cold cup, feeling the barn behind him settle with its usual morning creaks. A year had passed since the storm. A year since a giant horse had stood in the road with rain in his mane and desperation in his eyes. A year since Cole had followed that dark silhouette into the unknown and come back changed in places he didn't know could be mended. He walked toward Ember's pen, the frost crunching under his boots. Ember lifted his head, ears flicking in greeting. The once fragile foal now stood with the sturdy legs of a young mustang, his coat brighter and heavier, his gaze steady. Cole leaned against the fence, letting his hand rest on the cold wood. "You're a miracle, you know that," he murmured. Ember snorted softly, the warm puffs of breath turning to mist. Cole smiled, small and tired and true. "Your old man would be proud." As if summoned by the words, a distant tremor rolled through the ground, so faint Cole almost mistook it for his pulse. Ember lifted his head higher, nostrils flaring. The hawk on the fence post went still, eyes narrowing at the horizon. Cole felt the shift before he heard it, a steady rhythm of hooves carried by the morning air, slow at first, then resolving into a cadence rich with intention. He turned toward the ridge. Titan appeared like a memory returning home. The stallion stood on the crest of the hill, mane stirring in the soft breeze, his massive frame outlined by the pale morning sun. Age had crept into his silhouette, small changes visible only to someone who knew how he once carried himself. He was still enormous, still powerful, but there was a gentleness to his stance now, an earned weight in the way he held his head. Behind him, the rest of the herd gathered, a dozen mustangs of every shade, their breath rising in ghostly spirals. The same mare Titan had freed that night in the clearing stood near him, silver coat glinting in the dawn. A few younger horses trailed behind, heads turning curiously at the sight of the sanctuary below. Cole's breath caught, not from surprise, but from something quieter. Gratitude, maybe. Or the ache of knowing that moments like this didn't come twice. Titan began his descent down the ridge with slow, deliberate steps. The herd followed. Cole stayed where he was, hands loose at his sides, heart thudding in a rhythm that matched the approaching hoofbeats. Ember paced excitedly in his pen, tail flicking, nostrils flaring with recognition so strong it painted the air with tension. When Titan reached the fence, he didn't rear, didn't nicker, didn't claim space the way wild horses often did. He simply stood before Cole with the quiet dignity of something that had survived storms, loss, and long miles without asking anything in return. Cole approached until only the fence separated them. Titan lowered his head, breath warm against Cole's fingers. The air between them thickened with unspoken history, of a night in the storm, of trust formed in mud and desperation, of choices made without words. "Hey, big man," Cole whispered, voice catching. "I wondered when you'd come back." Titan blinked slowly, the amber of his eyes deep as polished stone. He let out a low exhale, and Cole felt the warmth of it travel through him in a way that was almost painful. Ember whinnied, a clear, eager sound that made Titan turn his head. The stallion stepped to the pen door and touched his muzzle to the younger horse's forehead, their breaths mingling in a soft, rhythmic exchange. Ember nudged back with a gentle insistence that made Cole swallow against the tightness in his chest. They belonged to each other. They always had. Cole looked up at the ridge, watching the rest of the herd shift and settle, waiting without impatience. He had seen a lot of horses in his life, some broken, some brave, some stubborn enough to outlive their own stories. But Titan was something carved from the land itself, a creature who wore loyalty like armor and loss like a map. And then Titan did something Cole didn't expect. He stepped back. Not far. Just enough to create a small, deliberate space between himself and the sanctuary fence. A choice. A farewell. Cole felt the moment bend, the same way it had the night. Titan begged him in the rain. Except this time the plea wasn't desperation. It was gratitude wearing the soft shape of parting. "I know," Cole whispered. "You don't have to stay. You did your job. You gave him a chance." Titan blinked, slow and heavy. Ember pressed against the rails, wanting more, wanting closeness, but also understanding in the instinctive way young creatures sometimes did. Titan nuzzled him once more, softer than a falling leaf, then lifted his head toward the ridge. The herd answered with a single, unified breath. Titan turned. Not sharply, not dramatically, just with the calm acceptance of something finishing what it came to do. Cole stepped back, fingers curling into the fabric of his coat, as if holding on to the cold could keep him steady. The stallion took a few steps, paused, looked back one last time. Cole lifted a hand, not waving, not reaching, just acknowledging. A thank you between beings that didn't speak the same language but understood the same wounds. Then Titan walked up the ridge. The herd followed. Their silhouettes stretched long against the morning light, fading into the brush, into the gold of the rising sun, into whatever stories wild horses keep for themselves. Cole stayed by the fence long after they disappeared, long after Ember settled again into the quiet rhythm of breath. Only when the plains grew still did Cole finally speak. "Safe travels," he whispered. "And thank you." The wind carried his words across the open land, scattering them like seeds waiting for spring. And in the silence that followed, Cole felt something inside him settle in a way it never had before. Not healed, not whole, but no longer lost. No longer alone. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell me in the comments what moment stayed with you the most. And if you'd like to join me for more true, heartfelt stories about people and the animals that change their lives, make sure to subscribe. There's so much more I can't wait to share with you.